Hello friends, welcome to ADO.NET tutorial. In this video, we will learn about data table and how to populate the data table. Before we use data table with ADO.NET object, we will use it as a standalone object. That means here we are not going to pull any data from the database and fill the table. Instead, we will cook the data ourselves and we will see how to use the data table to present the cooked data. In this video, we will populate the data table with some data cooked on the fly. Also, we will see how to assign a data table to the presentation control. So data table is an in-memory representation, right? So how do we show that to the user? So we need some control. Here it's a data view control. Using the data view control, we will assign our data table to it. And the DataGridView will take care of presenting the rows and columns of information in the tabular format. So if you see here, we will when we go to the form, we will create a button, fill data table, and in the click event, we will create a data table. So this is the instance name, data table, and reference is table. Once data table is created, we are making use of a columns property. We already learned about this in the previous video, and that will return you the data column collection, right? Since the table is newly constructed here, at this stage, the column will return 0 because there is no column. And we have to add the column since we have the column collection which was already retrieved from the data table. We can add the columns now. If you see the method, what we are using is the add, right? That's the method we are using on the collection. And to the add method, we are specifying the column name and the data type tied to that column. So in our example, we use 3 column and all will hold integer data. So our column names are first number, right, second number, so I'm specifying that in short form here, and third column name is result. Right, we have 3 columns and these columns are added one by one, right? So we retrieved the column collection from data table, then we populated the columns. So we created the columns data add, and to the add method we specified the caption as well as its data type. So that way we added 3 columns. Rows are not yet added. We just defined the columns, the white box stuff. Next, if you look at here, table dot rows. First we retrieve the column collection, right? And this time we are retrieving data row collection. So the property here is rows, right? Row will give the data row collection and we are calling that as table row. And here we are running the for loop that runs from 1 to 10. Inside, if you see, we are creating the data row. Right, each one is a data row here, right? That's the data row, one single row I can say. Then we are, once data row is formed, columns are already defined. Row of 0 here represents the first number, I is 1, so 1 we will be populating here. Then in the second line we are populating the constant 3, then I into 3, 3. So this is what we are doing, and in each iteration we will form a new row and populate this table. So second time I will be 2, constant 3, multiplication result is 6. So likewise we are populating the content, and if you see data row, there will be 10 instances of data row we will be creating, and we are adding it to the table rows. We already have it, right? Table rows, that's a data row collection dot add row, whatever we are forming here, data row instance, we are adding it. So if you visualize it now, first we retrieve the data table, the data column collection, and then we added the column A, B, C one by one. Once columns are defined, then from table we retrieve the rows collection. Rows collection will be initially empty, then we are running the loop, and that loop here in our example runs for 1 to 10 times, and each time we are creating a data row and adding it to our table rows collection, right? Table row is already retrieved from the table. Table is nothing but a data table. So initially the data table will be nothing, and we retrieved the column. We added 3 column, right, from the collection, data column collection. We retrieved data column collection, and then we added 3 column. After that we retrieved the table row collection, and initially rows will be empty. Then in the for loop we added the rows. Alright, now finally we have data table ready here in code snippet 1, and code snippet 2 we formed the rows. In code snippet 3, if you see, we are assigning this data table to the data source property of GV table. GV table is nothing but our data grid view, right? Presentation, data grid view, data source, and we are assigning the table. Now let's go to the demo. So now we will create a new project. Windows Forms application from Visual C#, and we will choose ado.net and select the folder. We will name this project as Lane Data Adapter, and we will click OK here. We will click OK here. So the Windows form is ready here. Data table example, and from toolbox we will simply drag and drop the data view, data grid control. It will be available under the data group. So drag and drop the data grid control, right? So you can use the add column properties and add the column manually here, or right, if you say name, data type, and header text, everything is there. But in our case we will add the data column at runtime. So now we will add a button. So here we will put a caption as fill data table btn fill data table. So usually .NET calls this as command button, so we can put cmd. Right, we will double click and open it. So we are creating the data table and defining the column. That's our first code snippet. Next we populate the data row, and finally we will add the table to our data grid view. Let's rebuild the solution, and we need to name our grid view. Instead of data grid view, here we are naming it as grid view table gv tables. Rebuild solution, and if you see the rebuild all is succeeded here. Now we will run it, and if you see, our data table will get filled with a multiplication table of 3. So we formed all these columns on the fly using the data column collection. Then we formed the for loop and added all these 10 rows to the data table. So here this data table is representing our on the fly cooked data. So it doesn't retrieve this data from the database. So data table you can use to represent your custom data. So if you read something from the file, you can place that and represent that here using the data table and grid view. Alright, that's all here in this example. Just now you saw the demo. Thank you for watching. Bye.